Hello and welcome to Playback, DRC World's weekly showcase of our best stories from around the globe. Coming up, is the fuel crisis improving in the UK? Our correspondent takes a look into the situation. A dark day for the WHO, the organization's Director General says after findings of sexual exploitation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The U.S. has come under criticism at home and abroad for deporting thousands of Haitian migrants. We go to the border to investigate the situation there. And thousands of people have fled the eruption of a volcano in the Canary Islands, but the danger isn't over. The U.S. has deported thousands of Haitians who've tried to enter the country over its southern border. Others who fear they would also be sent home have turned back to Mexico. Many were seeking asylum. Our correspondent Kilmeny Ducart sent us this report from the U.S.-Mexico border.
The main artery between Ciudad Acuña and Del Rio pumping once again. The international bridge was closed for more than a week when a surge of mostly Haitian migrants camped below the crossing. Nearly 15,000 at its peak. The immigration crisis bringing traffic and commerce between the border cities to a grinding halt. Now, there's not a soul in sight. While the Biden administration is facilitating deportations on the U.S. side, Mexican authorities have moved the remaining migrants to shelters like this one. Here, they can either seek asylum or Mexico will deport them back to their countries of origin.
We really feel at home here because people are supporting us. People here make us feel like we are really important to Mexico. This is the most important thing and what we want to feel. That's why my family and I choose to stay here. We want to stay here in Mexico.
I want to live a good life. This is the reason I left. We worked for around 2 months in order to come here. But this is the final step for coming to the U.S.
More than 200 migrants here are undergoing health checks and getting a hot meal after living in squalid conditions under the bridge, a situation that Ciudad Acuña's mayor tells me the city was unprepared for.
During this crisis, we requested that the state and federal government stop allowing migrants to just come through here because we weren't capable of giving them the proper attention that they needed. We asked that the government move migrants to another port of entry where they would have a better chance of being taken care of properly. I believe that's important.
To prevent another migrant surge, Mexican authorities have also set up checkpoints throughout the country and discouraged bus lines from allowing anyone to board buses headed north without the proper documentation.
As for many Haitians already here, returning to an impoverished nation with no economic prospects and a broken government isn't an option. It's a death sentence. Kilmeny Ducart, DRC World, Ciudad Acuña, Mexico.
The UK has mobilized the army to deliver fuel after petrol stations across the country had run dry. A truck driver shortage and panic buying have led to the crisis. The government said there were signs the situation is stabilizing, but as Sarah Morris reports from North London, there were still many people struggling to find fuel.
Desperate for fuel, drivers are spending hours sitting in lengthy queues snaking back from petrol stations. Often the wait is in vain, with pumps running dry before those waiting can get to them.
How low's your fuel gauge?
I'm not that low, I've still got a quarter of a tank, but my nan's probably going to die the next few days, so we need to try and get to Kent.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
With so many petrol stations closed, motorists are using the little fuel they do have left to hunt for service stations that still have supplies.
It was very hard. Early in the morning, I just got up and tried to go as the fuel station empty, then 2 others empty. This is the 4th one. And I have no fuel. I'm nearly going to East London now, so I don't know how to make it.
Some don't make it, finding themselves stranded before they can fill up. Tempers are also fraying. This footage shows a man holding a knife accusing another driver of jumping the queue. No one was injured, but the car was damaged. This service station in North London has just run out of petrol for the second time since Sunday. There is a little bit of diesel left, but only enough for the next few hours. And the owner has absolutely no idea when the next delivery will arrive. The problem's not a shortage of fuel, but rather a lack of truck drivers to transport it. Up to 150 military tanker drivers are on standby to help with deliveries. It will take 5 days to train them for the job, and the government is hopeful by then they won't be needed.
We are seeing the first very tentative signs of stabilisation of stock within the forecourt network itself. That won't necessarily be apparent in the queues at this stage, but this may be the hopeful sign, and so we'll keep a very close eye on this before doing anything further.
But normality is at least days, if not weeks away. If the panic buying doesn't stop, the government will consider rationing fuel by limiting how much each customer can buy. And some petrol stations may be reserved for the use of critical workers only. That could include health, emergency and transport professionals. Sarah Morris, TRT World, London.
While an independent commission has found that World Health Organization staff are among those accused of sexual abuse in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The investigation found more than 50 women accused aid workers of demanding sex in exchange for jobs during the 2018-2020 Ebola outbreak. Muttalib Erdogan sent this report from New York.
The World Health Organization says it's horrified over sexual exploitation by aid workers in the Democratic Republic of Congo. An independent inquiry was set up after 50 local women reported they were abused between 2018 to 2020. And it found that 83 aid workers sexually abuse women and girls while tackling the Ebola crisis in the country. The head of the organization, Tedros Adhanom, has apologized on behalf of the organization.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what was done to you by people who were employed by WHO to serve and protect you. I'm sorry for the ongoing suffering that these events must cause. I'm sorry that you have had to relieve them in talking to the Commission about your experiences.
The Commission interviewed dozens of women and found 21 out of 83 aid workers were employed by the WHO. Some women were allegedly plied with drinks before being abused. 2 became pregnant.
We in WHO are indeed humbled, horrified, and heartbroken by the findings of this inquiry. I'd like also to thank all the women and girls who have come forward and given evidence to the investigation, and thus have given us the basis on which to take action in WHO, which has been necessary.
The organization says it's fired 4 of its contractors and promised that it would take more measures. During the Ebola outbreak, more than 2,000 people died in Congo. The WHO declared the outbreak was over in June last year. Muttalib Erdogan, TRT World.
Lava from a volcano in the Canary Islands has been pouring into the ocean. Hundreds of homes have been destroyed since the volcano began erupting 2 weeks ago. But as Francis Collins reports, the latest developments are causing even more worry.
They're keeping their distance, but witnessing some incredible scenes. Spanish police vessels watching on as lava reaches the coast of La Palma, a Spanish island with 85,000 inhabitants. It's been flowing down from the Cumbre Vieja volcano since September the 19th, destroying more than 600 houses as well as churches and banana plantations. But the lava hitting the sea has raised even more concerns. There's the possibility of toxic gases being released due to a chemical reaction as it hits cold water. The molten rock could also fragment and cause explosions sounding like gunshots. The last 2 eruptions on La Palma in 1949 and 1971 killed 3 people, 2 of them from gas inhalation. Many people have fled. This German resident left in a hurry before returning, but he was unsure if he'd see his house and pets again.
The police were right when they said people should leave because the first crater erupted again and again, but there weren't even any ashes during the first 2 days. But then a second crater opened up in my direction with lava and fire. Then I was convinced I had to leave.
The volcano has been spewing huge columns of smoke and ash reaching several hundred meters high. Domestic flights have been cancelled and the airport closed at the weekend. It's since reopened, but the flights remain suspended, and that could go on a while. Scientists estimate the eruption could last for several weeks or even months. Francis Collins, TRT World.
Blah, blah, blah. Those were the mocking words of climate activist Greta Thunberg as she launched a withering attack on world leaders over their failed promises to address the climate crisis. Thunberg spoke to hundreds of young people from around the world as she opened a youth climate conference in Italy. Mehmet Solmaz has more.
There is no planet B. There is no planet blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah.
Quoting a speech UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson gave in April, Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg kicked off the Youth Climate Summit in Milan.
This is not about some expensive, politically correct green act of bunny hugging or blah, blah, blah. Build back better, blah, blah, blah. Green economy, blah, blah, blah. Climate neutral, blah, blah, blah. This is all we hear from our so-called leaders. Words that sound great, but so far has led to no action.
She also attacked world leaders for shamelessly congratulating themselves while making insufficient promises to cut greenhouse gas emissions.
They invite cherry-picked young people to meetings like this to pretend that they are listening to us. But they are not. They are clearly not listening to us. And they never have. Just look at the numbers. Look at the statistics. The emissions are still rising. The science doesn't lie.
During the Youth Summit, young people will debate how they can increase their role in pressuring governments to do more to slow global heating.
We'll do everything we can to get the population to pressure the government into doing what they have to do. But there's much out of our hands.
I come from Uganda. I'm calling on all young people from Uganda and from African countries that there's always something that you can do.
And it's not just the world's youth. The president of COP26, Alok Sharma, also took to the floor, clearly concerned that his make-or-break summit, only 1 month away, is going to fall short of the global commitments needed to make a meaningful difference. The relentless theme expected during the 3-day event is that time is short and there has to be real action now. The question is, are the older generations listening? Mehmet Solmaz, TRT World.
Azerbaijan has marked the first anniversary of the 44-day war that liberated the Nagorno-Karabakh region from Armenia. President Ilham Aliyev has thanked the Turkish government for its support. During the conflict, Azerbaijan's military took several cities and nearly 300 settlements and villages from Armenia. On the 10th of November, the two countries signed a Russian-brokered agreement to end the fighting and work toward a comprehensive resolution. Jafar Hasnain reports from Baku.
Worshippers gathered at this Russian Orthodox church in Baku on Monday to pray for the Azerbaijani soldiers who lost their lives during the Second Karabakh War. Azerbaijan was marking the first anniversary of the start of the 44 days war with Armenia as a day of remembrance. Similar prayers were held in mosques, synagogues, and other churches across the country.
On this day and in the following days, the whole people as one person were together. We prayed for our army, for our soldiers, so that God would grant them strength and victory. And God has heard our prayers, and Azerbaijan has regained its territories, restored its territorial integrity and sovereignty.
As part of the day's events, President Ilham Aliyev also addressed the nation.
The Second Karabakh War is part of our glorious history.
This victory will go down in history forever. The Azerbaijani armed forces restored our territorial integrity by crushing the enemy army in 44 days. I repeatedly said that Azerbaijani people would never come to terms with the occupation. I repeatedly said that we would regain our lands at any cost. I repeatedly said that if the enemy does not leave our lands of their own free will, we will expel them, and that is exactly what happened. We did not accept the defeat in the First Karabakh War. We gathered strength, mobilized our forces, strengthened our army, invigorated the country's economy, enhanced the authority of our country, and honorably fulfilled our historic mission.
The country also observed a moment of silence at noon to remember both the fallen in battle and the civilian victims, with both President and Vice President participating in the parade that followed. Azerbaijan says more than 2,900 of its soldiers were killed during the 6-week-long conflict, a war in which Azerbaijan successfully liberated Karabakh, a region that had been under Armenian occupation for almost 3 decades. To end the day in a touching ceremony, Azerbaijani youth illuminated sky lanterns to match the number of Azerbaijani soldiers killed. A year has passed since the start of the Second Karabakh War, but the memories of the Azerbaijani soldiers that were killed during the conflict continue to live in the hearts and the spirits of the people of this country. Jafar Hasnan, TRT World, Baku, Azerbaijan.
More than 350,000 people have been killed in 10 years of war in Syria. The figure has been released by the UN in its first official death toll in 7 years. The UN officially stopped counting deaths in the conflict at the beginning of 2014 because it said it had become impossible to accurately document the constantly growing toll. However, the organization says the latest estimate is certainly an undercount of the actual number of killings. Staying in Syria, former residents of the northern city of Afrin are slowly returning. The city was under the control of the YPG terror group until a Turkish-led operation drove the group out. Obeida Hito spoke to one man who now feels safe to return home after more than a decade in exile.
Ibrahim Hikmet is finally back in his childhood home, reunited with his family in the village of Sinkarli in Afrin. 14 years ago, Hikmet left for Libya. In 2011, he returned to Syria, first settling in the southern Sweda province and then in Aleppo.
Everyone in regime-controlled Aleppo says things about life here, whether they're Arab or Kurdish. We used to hear things like, they'll kill you on the road, but they don't know what it's really like. Everything is good. Things are easy. Nobody bothers or heckles us. If I knew things were so good, I wouldn't have stayed in Sweda. I would have come back as soon as Afrin was liberated.
Marwan Ibrahim watched Hikmet grow up and says he's glad the village's children are coming back home.
We have a saying that goes, paradise is nothing without people. We are alone here. Most of the young men left. When we hear that one of our village's sons has returned, it makes us very happy. He came back to his family. He's with his mother, taking care of his land. This makes us happy. I think we were happier than he was about his return.
The house has been in Hikmet's family for decades. It's also a Sinkarli landmark.
This is a very old building. It was my grandfather's home and my great-grandfather's home before him. When guests came to the village, they would come here. It also served as a guest house for the surrounding villages. If anyone came from Turkey, Azaz, Damascus, or anywhere, they would stay here.
Hikmet's mother, Almaza Isa, has lived here for 4 decades. She says now that her son is back, she feels like her home is complete again.
My husband passed away 2 years ago. After that, I was alone. I wanted my son to return, but he was afraid. Now that he's back, I'm so happy. We all grew up in this house and have taken care of it, planting trees. Even though my kids left, I never considered leaving.
The Hikmets aren't the only ones. As more estranged family members reunite, hope is spreading across the region. Afrin officials are encouraging Kurdish families to return home In this district, dozens of people have already reclaimed their properties and say they're looking forward to being reunited with friends, relatives, and neighbors soon. Obayda Hito, TRT World, Sinkarli, Syria.
Facebook says it's putting its plan to launch a children's version of Instagram on hold. It follows a report that suggests Facebook knew Instagram was causing harm to children, in particular to girls, and led in some cases to eating disorders and thoughts of self-harm. The existing app bans under 13s. Our North America correspondent John Brain reports.
How young is too young to be active on social media? Critics say the development of an Instagram app for 10 to 12-year-olds is a step too far. A damning report by the Wall Street Journal has accused Facebook of pressing ahead with the project despite knowing Instagram was harming teenagers. It revealed internal Facebook research, including one presentation which said, "We make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teenage girls."
If we do not address this problem as a society and also as Facebook, I think we're going to see a whole community of young girls that are disappointed in themselves for the rest of their lives, that feel that they will never reach a state that they think they should, rather than appreciating themselves for who they are.
In a lengthy rebuttal, Facebook has dismissed the Wall Street Journal report as selective. The research actually demonstrated that many teens we heard from feel that using Instagram helps them when they are struggling with the kinds of hard moments and issues that teenagers have always faced. But attorney generals from more than 40 US states are now calling on Facebook to abandon its plan. And irritation is growing on Capitol Hill. On Thursday, a Senate committee will be examining the potential harm being caused by social media companies to their young users. However, although Facebook has put its plan for a kid's Instagram on hold for the moment, it says it has no intention of abandoning it altogether. John Brain, TRT World, Washington.
If the idea of cloning sounds like science fiction, you're probably not alone. But in reality, it has little to do with mad scientists and more to do with technology. And it's probably more prevalent than you think. Taiba Aydin tells the story of one niche cloning center in Dubai.
Delicate ears, full snouts, droopy lips, and an elegant neck. Not every animal is blessed with such a genetic endowment. Camel cloning is all the rage in the Middle East, with wealthy clients wanting to replace their most beautiful, their fastest, or their best milk-producing camel with one just like it.
At present, we are concentrating on camels because we have so much demand for cloning camels that we are not able to cope up with the demand.
Camels have been firmly rooted and valued in Arab society since antiquity. And camel racing has always been an anticipated event at festivals and celebrations. So the idea of having a duplicate of your best racing camel, equally strong and fast, was so tempting that it led scientists to produce the world's first cloned camel in 2009. Injaz was cloned from the ovarian cells of a slaughtered camel. Since then, scientists in this clinic have ramped up production.
We can produce the exact genetic copies of the animals, of the elite animals, whether they are racing champions, whether they are good milk animals, whether they are elite bulls, or whether they are beauty queens.
While camel races are still popular, the new development is beauty pageants. Yes, you heard that right, beauty pageants for camels. And it's high stakes, with a top prize of $370,000 up for grabs. Judges have discovered camels illegally being given Botox and cosmetic fillers. But a clone, that's well within the rules.
We have cloned some of the beauty queens also, and they are genetically same, exactly genetic same copy of the beauty queens. Now the question is whether they will, be beauty queens, they will be exactly same genetically, but when the next time when they will be in the competition, whether there will be any other better than them in the competition, that is the question.
But it doesn't come cheap. A duplicate camel can set you back $100,000. And while animal cloning remains a hot ethical debate in the scientific community, it seems these ships of the deserts are only going to continue to be replicated. Taiba Aydin, TRT World.
Well, that rounds up your week of news here on Playback. We'll leave you with these pictures of the Turkish Air Force's aerobautics team. The Turkish Stars staged a spectacular performance for this year's Teknofest. Turkey's Aerospace Festival is a big draw. In 2019, more than 1.7 million people attended. Last year, the number of team applications increased despite the pandemic. Stay tuned to TRT World for the latest stories.